All right, welcome everybody. This is the Influencer Show. Today I have Adam Earnhardt to a little bit about how your impact on the Valley has been. I've been seeing you everywhere, by the way. You're prolific on social media. I saw you hosting a political debate. So why don't you give background to our audience about where you came from and what you've been into?
Yeah, so my wife calls me a shameless self-promoter.
Okay.
That probably helps a little bit. By the way, it is really warm in here, man.
The fire, yeah.
That's great. That's the very first thing that I said when I walked in here. It's like, oh, you get the fire going.
That's right.
Yeah, no.
We're going to play some Barry White back here, but I thought that would get weird.
So no one will know. Yes, I like it. With like a couple glasses of wine.
Right.
Yeah. No, I moved. My wife and I moved to Youngstown in 2007, but I was already working here at YSU. So I was commuting back and forth from Clarion, Pennsylvania to Youngstown. And that got old. I bet. Especially when we started having kids, we're like, yeah, no, but we were specifically looking for an area where we could raise a family that was diverse, that kind of had the background, the culture that we felt we could thrive in. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, the door is really opened for us when we got here. And I found a lot of opportunities to kind of explore the research that I was doing back then. And it was weird because in 2005, it was, we were still calling it like Web 2.0. We weren't even calling it social media yet. So that's what I was studying, though. I was studying social media and sports, and in some way, the kind of like the intersect of those two things. Back before we even had, I still remember, and I tell people this all the time. One of the very first classes I walked into at YSU was a research class. And about halfway through the semester, there was this like gaggle of students over in the corner looking at something on a laptop or whatever. And they said, Dr. Earnhardt, you got to check out this new thing called Facebook. I'm like, yeah, right. What could be better than MySpace? I was on MySpace. I mean, who needed anything else? It was, and I had a friend on MySpace. We all had one friend on MySpace.
At least one.
Yeah, at least one. You started off with one. But, so that kind of blossomed into some other things. And, it was right around that time, too, that I started kind of thinking about where that research was going. And so was everybody else, not just researchers, not just social scientists, but everybody. I mean, so you had business leaders and critics and so on. So they were looking to make sense of this all. And that's what I was trying to help to do to some extent. A lot of us were in that field.
A lot of laggards, though. A lot of people that were kicking and screaming.
And still to this day, I mean, if you think about it, there still are a lot of laggards. I mean, people who are on Facebook are just fine with Facebook, and they weren't fine with Facebook back then.
Right.
But now they're fine with it. With some, obviously some problems with privacy and so on, security. But forget Snapchat. I mean, they won't take that next step into those other platforms until somebody really pushes them to do it, right? Exactly. And that's kind of like what Facebook did. Facebook was like, well, we want everybody to be on this if you're going to get access to something, so we're going to basically push you onto it. So I think that, there were a lot of laggards back then,
for sure,
including me to some extent. But now I see my kids on it all the time, and they're doing great stuff, and they're creating content like this.
Yeah,
they're creating they're content creators, and there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Well, and it was tough because everybody, when you have a new technology, they try to think the practical exercise of that technology. Yeah. And even now, like with 3D printers, the people that are dabbling in it are struggling to be able to find like what you do with the things once you print it. And then once those gears go, then that leads into something else. And eventually like, it started here.
The 3D printing thing is cool, by the way. I got a quick story about that because of the Northside pool. So Northside, there's a kid who lives across the street from me who has a 3D printer. And there was something going on with the filters at the Northside pool, which they just opened today, I think, because they were training all these lifeguards. And they had one piece that they couldn't get anywhere for 13 filters. He 3D printed them. Beautiful. Whatever he needed to get the pool open.
Isn't that cool?
It's awesome. Yeah, but that kind of stuff, there's applications that we never, 5 years ago.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be a texter. Like when I used to see kids doing text, I was like, it takes too long. I just make a phone call, and now,
I'm sitting along like,
are
you? Because then my kids are always teasing me. So are you like a one? Can you do it one hand? Or,
I can't do one
hand.
No,
I know. I just got to the point where I can do two thumbs.
Okay, I'm like this.
Nah, I know. Yeah, hunt back.
Yeah, right. I never learned how to, type on a regular keyboard too. So I'm fast at a version that I created, But
yeah, very cool. Well, so then the other side of that, because you were asking about how I got involved with the sports fandom stuff. That's crazy too, because we started pulling together. There wasn't a whole lot of space in our academic journals for fan studies, especially sports fandom studies. Back in the 70s, and this is getting a lot better now, but back in the 70s, they were kind of 60s and 70s, they were thumbing their nose at those kinds of studies. But man, I mean, that's billions of dollars,
Heck
right?
yeah.
That we weren't researching. And so we kind of started to dabble in that. And so because there wasn't a whole lot of room in the journals, we started basically putting our own books together. So I had 2 or 3 books in fandom studies, a couple books focused on ESPN that I was working with some colleagues from around the nation that, all right, these guys are brilliant. And I was just kind of riding their coattails now, but it felt like that sometimes. I mean, like I would read their stuff when they would submit it to me for an edited book. I'd be like, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is going to change the way we think about, the power of ESPN and so on. And that's exactly what it did. So that opened up some doors. And there's always a journalist out there who's curious about fans and fan reactions to things. And so when the pandemic started, it was like, well, are people actually going to go back to the stadiums? Are people going to, how are they going to absorb sports? And so that turned into a lot of interviews with some outlets, basically in the United States, but a few internationally too.
So tell me how that political debate. I wouldn't think, yeah, Adam would do this. This is something you do. How did you get roped into that?
Press Club. So I'm executive director of the Youngstown Press Club. Small group. We were just getting started again. And my wife, by the way, was the first executive director and handed it off to me because she went on to do some other things. But we were just getting going when, all hell broke loose with, like everybody's life got turned upside down last year. But we wanted to stay active. And so the Press Club Board of Governors, we all kind of got together and said, okay, what's the one thing that we can at least try to pull off this fall? And that was the debate. It just kind of all came together. It was, we were trying to be, kind of a big tent too. Right. I mean, it could have just been the Republican and the Democrat candidate, but the Libertarian candidate got enough signatures to get on the ballot. We thought, well, why not invite Mike too? So we had, we had a pretty robust debate, and I was scared to death.
Were you really?
Yeah, because and it got a little heated towards the end there. If you remember the last 10 minutes of that debate or whatever, but I told them at the very beginning, I'm like, look, I said, I'm just going to, I'm going to play ringmaster. I'm basically try to keep you all in line and focused on, getting the in and out, because this is live TV, and I think this was on FMJ, WFMJ, and there was, a very short commercial break at the top of the hour, and then boom, they were going into their prime time. So there was no way we were going to mess around with that. And it just worked out perfectly. Everybody got to ask a question. There was participation across the board. And I think everybody kind of felt like that was a success for us.
Yeah, you did a really good job, by the way.
Oh,
and it's not an easy thing. I know, I tried to do the opposite one time where I tried to get politicians to not stump speech, right? I tried to get them on let's talk about you and your personal life, whatever. And then 30 seconds in, it's like, boom, stump speech.
Well, and I know you did that because you interviewed Tony Spano.
A
couple weeks ago or however long ago it was, and Tony did that too. So he had all of the candidates on, the mayoral candidates for Youngstown, and I thought he tried to do the same thing. He tried to kind of keep them reined in a little bit. But that's tough to do with politicians.
No.
When they start talking, and I'm the same way.
Right.
You know how they get, it's like I won't say the nasty word, but it's like of the mouth. It's like you just don't stop talking sometimes, and then you have to find ways to interject.
Yeah, and you did a really good job of refocusing, and because as a viewer, the stuff you really are wondering from a politician, they stray away from what you really want to hear, and they go off and say their line. And I think you did a good job of keeping them on.
I will say this, though, I did have help, and that was what you didn't see was off in the corner was 2 people, Elise Gessler and Lori Factor. So Lori Factor, Elise Gessler is a faculty member in the Department of Communication at YSU, but Lori Factor is the director of the Summer Festival of the Arts. And they were the timekeepers.
Okay.
So they'd look over at me and they're like, when the camera wasn't on us, we were like.
So you're a professor at YSU, or are you still over there involved?
Yeah. So still, trying to. I was department chair for a while, and for about 7 or 8 years, and then I stepped back from that because I felt like, well, I really wasn't getting enough time to do the research that I wanted to do. So stepped back from that, and then jumped right back into helping the administration, trying to work through some of these pandemic related issues that we're dealing with recruitment and retention and so on. Right. But it's a very challenging time in higher ed, just in general. I mean, there's news everywhere of universities that are battling some issues. I mean, just across, I was just reading yesterday, just over in Pennsylvania, right across the border, you have all of these state schools that are talking about merging. I mean, you would never have thought that, Clarion University and California University of Pennsylvania and Edinburgh would become one.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have? I mean, I never would have thought that many. But that's the kind of stuff that everybody's dealing with right now, and just trying to navigate that and seeing where higher ed's going to be in the next 5 years, because it's not going to be the same as it was in 2019. Do
you have a guess? Do you think that remote exposure is going to be a permanent thing?
Yeah, I think there will always be this kind of like hybrid approach. Right. So, you've got options for online classes, and I have students who tell me I thrive in online classes. And then I have other students who tell me never again, I can never take another online class again. I got to be. And so I think because of that, we're getting close to what that balance is. And for every university, it's going to be different. So I think every place is going to be a little bit still trying to figure that out. But I think really in the next 5 years or so, we're going to be trying to identify like not just what the delivery modes should be or could be, but what the outcomes will be. So you're looking at like digital certificate programs, which are hot right now, micro credentials, badging, all of those kinds of things are things that we're a little behind on. Behind the eight ball, but we're getting better. We're almost there to the point where we can say, okay, we can construct these things that we think will meet the needs of people, not just in the Valley, but worldwide.
Yeah, and I don't know if universities are going to be able, like, immense amount of infrastructure for in-person learning, and then all of a sudden you rip half those people out of there if they can sustain those campuses and whatever, if people are doing it remote. Or
not, yeah, they're not living on campus. So you've built all of these and then we're not doing so much of that here, but other places have just spent tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure plans that are building brand new residence halls or refabbing residence halls. For who? I mean, if people are going to be gone, like who's going to live there? And I think they're still trying to figure that out. The value proposition is important. I think if you can find a way to develop a value proposition for the traditional college age student who's coming out of high school about why coming to a university campus and living on that campus is important to your growth, not just knowledge wise, but just life in general, learning about life, learning about living away from home, making friends, building your, really in some cases, your first network, professional network. Then that's where we will be. I mean, if we can figure out what that value proposition is and how to state that and phrase that for this generation, that's going to be important. Those are the universities that will succeed.
Gotcha. So I'm sure you get asked this a lot. You're a big advocate for this area, and we're training some genius kids that come out of here, and we're leaking them to other markets. Brain drain, yeah. Yeah, and so what are your guesses as how we retain some more of that?
So this isn't a popular thing to say always, but this is how I have always approached it: is go away, just come back.
All right.
Remember us when you're rich and famous.
Okay.
Kind of thing, right?
Bring your money back.
Yes. Yeah. Bring your money back. Yeah. And I think to some extent that's happening. We see students who are like, look, I love Youngstown. This will always be home to me. I think my kids are feeling the same way.
Right.
They know they don't have a choice, by the way. My kids are all going to YSU. Yeah, I have 4 kids. They're all going to, and they know that. They're happy with that. We've always said to them, okay, you do your first degree at YSU. If you want to do master's, PhD, something somewhere else, we'll help you. But do the first one here, because and they think about this. They think about leaving and coming back. And if you think about it, that's really what you want. You want somebody to go out and experience the world. This is why we do study abroad. This is why we encourage students to do a semester at sea or a semester someplace else, because you bring back that experience that you otherwise never would have gotten, right? So I think brain gain sometimes can be a byproduct of brain drain. So even though we lose these people, we lose this really high, super talented students, the ones who are local, who grew up here, I think there's always a chance of getting them to come back.
Yeah, we just have to reintroduce the city back to them and stay on the map and be an option when they...
And create the opportunities for them to come back, right? I mean, so if the opportunities aren't here, then why would they? But right. I think we're starting to see that. I think we're, with the electric vehicle area, the Voltage Valley kind of vibe that's happening. I think there are a lot of America Makes. I think there are a lot of kids. I use that term as a term of endearment. I say my kids. And some of these students are older than me, but as a term of endearment, like I say my kids. We want them to come back, and I think if they start to see more things like that, then they will.
Opinions on Lordstown Motors and the battery plant and that whole electric car thing in our area?
Well, as a stockholder in Lordstown Motor Company,
I'm
all, because I bought Robinhood, right? So I thought, well, I'll go on Robinhood and buy 10 shares, and then
didn't go well.
No,
did not go well.
I honestly, I think it's I hate to use the term too big to fail, but I think it's one of those things where enough people are invested, not just through stock buys, but invested in the success of that vehicle, they'll find a way to right the ship. I really do. And then on top of that, you have everything else going on with batteries and so on that are happening here in the Valley that it really kind of sets us up for success. It's not just one company. It's actually a series of companies, a series of ideas and inventions that are really going to propel us.
Yeah, and if we can attract those people back here when there's good paying jobs in engineering and all of that stuff, that would be a great way to tempt people back to the area.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's in the future for Adam here? Do you got any things in the hopper?
I was just telling my wife I got to get a book proposal together. No, I have so I've got a couple ideas on some book proposals, but they're all related to fandom. And the idea here is that fandom has really changed. I mean, we talked about this earlier, but this idea of during the pandemic, so here's a good example. So these are the things that happen in my head, right? And I broached this subject with a friend of mine, a prolific scholar, Dan Wan. If you ever look him up, Murray State in Kentucky. Dan is a sports psychologist, but prolific. I mean, he's got like hundreds of journal articles. I said, Dan, why is viewership down? Why are ratings down for the World Series last summer? Or last year? Why were ratings down for the NBA when they were in the bubble, right? You would think that ratings would be up, especially LeBron James. I mean, is in the bubble and he's, wins the championship with another team, right? You would think that rate, and they weren't. And so I try not to answer the questions in my head before I do the research, right. But this one was tough not to at least want to explore. And I'm like, well, we didn't see ourselves in the stands. And if you think about it, the NFL ratings actually weren't bad. So the NFL ratings were okay because we actually saw some people in the stands, even if they were cardboard cutouts.
Right.
We saw them. So when we don't see ourselves in the stands, we don't live vicariously through the other fans who
the excitement of the people that we see,
screaming and yelling and throwing things and whatever else. But those are the kinds of things that I think that the pandemic actually forced us to look at. I mean, pull a curtain back and explore, and we're just scratching the surface, man. I mean, there's just so much happening that with fandom that we just don't understand. That I think that's where I'm going to go next.
Beautiful. Okay, yeah. Well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, man.
Gosh, my pleasure.
Really appreciate you being down here. We'll check in with you and see what your future endeavors have.
Anytime, and I'll bring my s'mores. With me
Marshmallow.
next
We'll do
time.
marshmallows
Yeah,
next
yeah.
time. All right. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.